Let's now turn to birds, a story that will have bird fanciers in a flat, but which will incense you even if you can't tell an eagle from a robin redbreast. Nicholas Woolley reports.
Behind that formal announcement lies a story of intrigue, inducements and deception, of a government department involved in a bizarre scheme to obtain convictions by manufacturing the evidence, and of a sequence of extraordinary events that began 12 months earlier.
The first thing I knew about it was on the morning of the 25th of May. Me and my wife were in bed, and about 7 o'clock in the morning there was a bang on the door. My wife naturally got up to answer the door, but she looked out the window first and she seen police cars and, you know, a lot of strange cars parked outside my home.
Like thousands of men on Teesside, David Ray hasn't had a job for more than 2 years. But in that time, the aimlessness of unemployment has been replaced by an unexpected passion. David Ray has become a falconer. With his friend Mark Robb, he's acquired the ancient skills of training and breeding peregrines, aristocrats among Britain's birds of prey. It was all fine, until the morning the authorities turned up on David Ray's doorstep with a search warrant.
They'd searched the home that I was living in. Then on arriving at the Averys, there was a police car waiting outside the Averys, and there they proceeded to confiscate all my birds, mine and Mark's birds.
It was here, at the Department of the Environment in Bristol, that the decision was made to take out the search warrant. Directly responsible was the Bird Registration Department, and present when the raid took place were Bob Bell, one of the department's wildlife inspectors, and John Ely, his immediate superior. A third person present on the day of the raid was Peter Robinson, Senior Investigations Officer for the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, which often works with the Department of the Environment in bringing prosecutions involving birds of prey. In this case, the authorities claimed that 2 of the confiscated peregrines hadn't been bred in captivity, but had been either illegally imported or stolen from the wild. Normally, anyone accused of a crime is presumed innocent until proved guilty. But under the Wildlife and Countryside Act, it's the other way round. Millions of people can testify to the RSPB's good work. But even so, the 2 young falconers were still worried about being able to prove their innocence. A few days after the raid, David Ray rang Bob Bell, the DOE inspector in Bristol, to find out what charges, if any, were going to be brought. Bob Bell said he didn't know, but he did have something else to say.
He says, well, you can help yourself if you help us, in as many words. Then after that, I just left it at that. I went straight back, told Mark what had happened. Well, the next day he got on the telephone, phoned Bob Bell up.
And he said, listen, Mark, we know that you know certain people in the south of England, and we don't really want you or David, we don't really need you or anything. Well, your best thing to do, he said, is to give us any sort of information on these people, and we will give you your birds back with no prosecution.
Mark Robb has finally found a job, but he had to go 8,000 miles to do it, to the Falklands, where he's been helping to build a new airport and studying the birds. But while Mark Robb was being offered a deal by Bob Bell, could Bob Bell fulfill his promises? After all, it was the RSPB who would be taking out any prosecution against the 2 falconers. Would they agree to that kind of arrangement?
I was approached early on, very soon after that we visited the Rob and Ray's premises, and was told that Rob was prepared to pass certain information if the case against him could be dropped. My reaction to that was very much along the lines of that I'd like to see the information first before I certainly consider dropping anything.
What information were you being offered?
I think we get into the problems here that this is a matter that's been looked into by the police, but it was information about a certain individual.
The man the authorities wanted information about was a wealthy property developer from Buckinghamshire. Keith Sweetman has been interested in birds of prey since the 60s. And in the inevitable conflict between bird protectionists and falconers, Keith Sweetman readily admits he's been a thorn in the side of the authorities. The difficulty about Bob Bell's proposed deal with David Ray and Mark Robb was that neither of them had any information about Keith Sweetman's activities as a falconer to pass on.
Now, it must be emphasised that at this stage, nothing improper whatsoever had been suggested or done by either the RSPB or the Department of the Environment. Suspects are frequently given lenient treatment and even immunity from prosecution in return for information. It was what happened next between the Department of the Environment and the two young falconers that broke all the rules.
Bob Bell began feeding David Ray and Mark Robb with information about Keith Sweetman's circumstances and activities. And he arranged to meet them in a pub in their hometown, Redcar.
We had a drink and we discussed certain ideas that they were interested in and which they wanted us to carry out, i.e. which was either to give Keith illegal birds or to sell him an illegal bird.
Mark and myself turned around and said, well, if we do sell him an illegal bird, you know, if you get Keith, you're going to have to do us for selling him an illegal bird. So, like, that idea was blown out the window. And his next suggestion was, could we, you know, was there